you had to do was check the manufacturing dates, offset by weather, and the derivative of the Nikkei index.
Most of the time, I don't know what he's talking about. Kids these days, what with all the technology.
Die! Die! Die!
Doesn't seem like they stay kids very long.
Good evening and welcome to CCN News, your source for the latest news and update from around the globe. I am Monica Dosu, and today we bring you news about video games, violence, and their effects on children. There has been much talk about whether video games is linked to increased aggressiveness in kids. An experimental study conducted by a UB professor Richard Lamb in the Graduate School of Education, he took a look at the relationship between video games and violent behavior. Lamb's research, based on a computational model that studies relationships of factors, indicated certain people had social, emotional, cognitive, and biological vulnerabilities. In his study, he stated that if someone with those vulnerabilities were to play violent video games, then they could potentially be triggered and act out aggressively or violently. A quote from Lamb says, "It's not just the violent games themselves. Someone could easily play hundreds of hours of violent video games and never once be violent." Richard Lamb's studies was conducted using 1,000 gamers that ranged from 9th grade to 12th grade. When recounting his study, Lamb said, "Predicting violent behavior was difficult when comparing use of these video games with genetic disposition or social factors alone. However, when he conducted social, emotional, and biological factors in what he called the diathesis stress model, which defines how genetic or biological factors interact with environmental stress, which results in a disorder or condition, then the video games could become a trigger for acting out in a violent way." In summary of Richard Lamb's research, he says that the video game itself does not independently make a child violent, but there are other factors to take into account. When you take the other factors and add video games to the equation, the games act out as a trigger to violence. Now we have Talia out in the field discussing these matters with the public.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Talia, and I'm here with
Braden.
Hi, Braden. So, how do you feel about violent video games, and do you think that affects children's behavior? Causing any aggression?
For most kids, yes, but some kids aren't.
Okay, good input. So, due to Harvard's health publications, due to their studies, they say that we should protect children from being exposed to violent video games. Have you witnessed that in any children or experienced it firsthand, any aggression due to these video games?
I haven't, but I know people that have because they were exposed to other people online that were aggressive, so they grew up being aggressive.
Okay, well, thank you for your input. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you.
And back to you, Monica.
That was interesting. Well, thank you, Talia, for gathering insight on the people's opinion regarding this topic. Now, a second study was conducted by Aniki Pullman, Brim Orobio de Castro, and Marcel A.G. Van Aken. I hope I'm pronouncing their names right. From the Facility of Social Sciences in Ulster University. The Netherlands measured the effect of children interacting with violent video games. These researchers gathered a group of 57 kids, ranging from 10 to 13 years old, and exposed them to various video games. This experiment was conducted at a children's school where they were split into randomized pairing and asked to interact with video games in 3 different ways: actively playing violent video games, actively playing non-violent games, and passively watching violent games. Almost all the boys were already frequent players before the study and may have acquired a schemata, which is defined as the method by which the brain organizes knowledge based on a past experience. Pullman and Oribio de Castro stated in their 2006 study that perhaps the effect is specific for boys because the active violent condition may have activated this pre-existing violence schemata that they had previously acquired through frequent game playing. This activation seems to be short-lived, but may lead to a heightened likelihood of becoming aggressive with others in the playground. In contrast, the girls played less video games in their daily lives, so there was no schemata to be activated by playing a violent video game only once. The effect on violent video games on aggression appears to stem from a child actively playing the game, as it can give the child a very like experience of physically participating in the actions. On the contrary, children who watched violent gameplay did not exhibit an increase in aggression. The games also seem to have a stronger effect on boys, possibly due to them already playing more violent games prior to this study and thus developing a schemata. Back to Talia once again with another segment with the public.
Hi guys, I'm Talia, and today I'm here with
Brandon.
Hi Brandon. So, do you think violent video game exposure contributes to youth violence?
Not really. Honestly, I think kids know the difference between like real life and a video game. I think, the more contributing factors is like their home life. Like you teach them like a cartoon is a cartoon, it's not real life, they're gonna know the difference. They're not gonna, carry that on in real life. I think that most of their learned behaviors is at home. Like you let them be violent at home, you let them act up, you let them act out. They're gonna take those actions outside of the house. I think the video game, they know it's not real. That stuff can't happen in real life. So most kids, I think, know the difference.
Yeah, very good answer. From your perspective, how significant of a role do you think video games reflect on children's behavior?
Just like I said, I don't think it's that significant. I think it's more. I do think some kids do get attached to video games, and that's all they want to do. But I don't think that they take it from a video game to the real world. I think they can detach once they're off the video game and know that they're in the real world versus on the video.
All right. Well, thank you for your answer. Thank you for your time. All right. I am here with Olivia. All right. So, do you guys believe that there's a relationship between violent video games and aggressive behavior in children?
I think minimally, I think it's mostly the parents and the surroundings of the rest of their life, not just what video games are playing. I think that their parents should have good influence on them. And as long as that's not all they're doing, as long as they get out and, or there might be other underlying circumstances, I think it has a lot to do with a lot of things like this video games.
What about you, Olivia?
I think that it also depends on how old they are. Say you're giving a 5-year-old video games, that's what they're going to see and that's what they're going to learn from and that's what they're going to know. So I feel like there should be an age restriction on, violent images and stuff like that. But I do think that parenting is another aspect that will definitely affect it. But I do think that violent video games being advertised for children is negatively affecting that.
Okay. I was just gonna ask, do you think that those violent video games have an effect on aggressive behavior in children?
Yes. Partially.
Very good answer, guys. So, based on studies from the University of Buffalo, it shows that there are many links that factor from violent video games in children's behavior. So do you think that, those video games have an effect on like aggressive behavior?
I think it could, but again, I think that there's a lot of factors. I think it's also relates to what else they're around and what else they're exposed to. So I think that if they've got parents that check them for doing something wrong, or they've got older siblings to set better examples for them, or and they're around other positive influences, I don't think video game can be to blame for everything. Not 100% anyway.
While I don't think that it's the only source that's contributing to youth violence, I do think that that it's one of them, because kids do spend a lot of time on video games, and that's what they're seeing and that's what they're learning, and their minds aren't fully developed yet, so that's what they're kind of intaking, and they're seeing all these graphic images and it's becoming normal to them more and more that they see it. So I do think that it's definitely a tribute.
Well, I appreciate your input on it, guys. It was nice talking to you.
All right, and that's all we have for today.
Thank you again, Talia, and thank you everyone for tuning in on CCN News. Until next time.